Hey guys, I'm Hannah and this is Ray, and we are engaged and about to get married on Saturday, so we are very excited for that. But as you can see, we are apart. Big sad. Ray is a youth pastor in Columbus, and I am going to be a teacher in Columbus starting in August. So we are excited to get married and excited for me to move up there and for us to really just start life together because this pandemic has been really tough for us as we've had to be apart more than usual. But we are really excited for this week, and we just were very excited when Eric asked us to do a devotion because we just really wanted to share our heart with you guys. And we're going to share from Psalm 90. And this has been a passage in the Bible that's been really important in our relationship and something that we've prayed through a lot and thought through. And so we're just really excited to get to share it with you. And Ray, do you have anything to add to start us off?
This was one of my favorite passages in the Bible, something that really challenged me a lot before me and Hannah started dating. And so it has a lot to say to everybody, not just people who are getting married in the next like 5 days or whatever. So hopefully you guys aren't bored by all of our sappiness and actually get some Jesus out of this. So,
Absolutely.
Han, would you like to read Psalm
Yeah.
90 for everybody?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start by reading it, and then I think Ray's just going to kind of break it down. Like I said, he's a youth pastor, so that's kind of what he does. And then I'll go ahead and close this out. So, Psalm 90. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You return man to dust and say, Return, O children of man. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80, yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and the wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands.
Amen. That's fantastic. Um, yeah, parts of this definitely sound like, if we're being honest, a little bit of a bummer to read at a wedding. Um, but there's a couple of really great nuggets of like gospel joy in here, that I think soften it up a little bit, make it a little more wedding appropriate. So I just thinking about like the best way to talk through this. I broke Psalm 90 down into three little chunks. Uh, and I will work to keep this short because I am not often short-winded. So let's do this. Verses 1 and 2 are kind of just an introduction in here, um, as as the psalmist praises God, um, basically saying that God has been God forever, and that's a pretty solid place to start. Um, Really, any of our time, whether it's just daily prayer time, even just preparing our hearts before church on Sunday morning, just starting our day, just remembering who God is, um, and remembering that He has been as good as He is now for as long as He has been, and He will be good forever. And then, after looking at God's power and God's goodness, this author spends verses 3 through 11 basically talking about how we are not as, what's the word I'm looking for? As we were not going to live as long as God is. We are not infinite. We are finite. Finite. That's the word I was looking for there. And we are not nearly as holy as God is, right? So the psalmist talks about uh, how we return to dust. We are swept away like grass that withers in the sun. It talks about God's wrath and anger, which is pretty scary, as it should be, right? Because again, God's going to be around longer than we're going to be around on this earth, um, and that's because all of us are dead in our sin, and only given life back at the cross through Jesus' sacrifice. And so after a pretty lengthy, again, maybe not super joyful wedding text, but after a pretty lengthy dialogue on uh, how we're finite and just the fact that we're going to die someday, um, that our life ends like a sigh, the psalmist goes into this really, for me, unexpected ending of the psalm. And he spends verses 12 through 17 explaining why it's good for us to remember our finitude, why it's good for us to remember that the end is coming. And this is kind of where this starts to be a little bit more applicable to me and Hannah as people who are about to be married, uh, and just to all of us as people trying to follow Jesus, right? And my favorite two verses from this psalm are verses 12 and verses 14, where he writes, "Teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom," right? So all of this remembering the bad is what reminds us that we need God, right? Because ultimately, wisdom comes back to an understanding that God's way is better for us than our way is. Uh, and so remembering that someday we're going to um, leave this world and stand before God really reminds us uh, that living wisely is not just something that's good for us, but it's not something that's good for us now, but it's something that has eternal benefit for us. And then verse 14, satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad for all of our days. Um, I know that, man, for me, I am somebody that if I don't spend my time with God in the morning, I'm going to be cranky, right? And going back to me and Hannah personally, Hannah has definitely felt that crankiness. And so marriage is, I think, for us as we feel it approaching. Um, for me personally, it's like a reason to challenge myself to keep growing spiritually, but also it's like an accountability to keep doing so, right? So I am motivated to grow in my walk with God because I want to love my new roommate, my new wife, as I want to love her as Christ-like as possible. But also, when I'm not doing that, she's going to give me the loving spiritual kick in the butt that I need to step things up. And that's really like the heart of why this psalm is so meaningful. I think to both of us, just and like the reason we want to read it at our wedding is because we want to leave each other better than we found each other. You know, um, we want to give each other back to Jesus when death does us part, looking more Christ-like than we found each other. And I think that has really been, on our best days, the battle cry of our relationship, and on the worst days, the thing that we beat each other over the head with, like, "Hey, you're being a sinner, and knock it off." So, um, yeah, I think that my encouragement from Psalm 90 would be that we would all spend some time this week really looking, maybe at the end of the psalm, right, where he prays that God would establish the work of his hands. Um, that's a sobering prayer for me to pray. Like, man, how often am I doing things that I'm really comfortable asking God to prosper, right? Like, am I really pursuing things that I feel comfortable saying, yeah, God, bring me more of this, right? Let this really take root. Because if I'm pursuing things that are selfish or pursuing things just for selfish reasons, my heart knows that. And I am not going to feel comfortable praying for God to establish that, um, because I know that I'm just being full of myself. So, um, yeah, we appreciate you guys tuning in. And we would love to have you guys praying for us as we start our lives together, because we're going to need all the Jesus and prayer that we can get. So thank you guys.
Yeah, and I just kind of thinking as he was talking, it kind of tied in a little bit to what Pastor Mark was talking about on Sunday about um, the how he looked at the Greek root of self forgetfulness and how it was remembering our own littleness. And I think this psalm at the beginning really talks about our littleness and our finiteness, like Ray was saying, or finitude. Is that the word he used? But so I just think that like that kind of ties in really well, and then also just thinking about God's way and really meditating on that and just living our lives for his glory. And something that Ray says often is that we are like getting married and we are existing as believers, not just the two of us, but in a church and around our friends, to push each other towards Christ and then send each other off to him, like when we are done in this life. And so I think that just as believers, just really be keeping in mind, like those around us, we are to be pushing them towards Christ. And then when we're done in this life, it's our job to send us off to him. And like, what a wonderful reward that is. And like a way to remember how small we are and how big he is and how his plan is so much greater than what we could ever hope for. So, yes. Do you have anything else to add before I pray us out?
No, I think that's great.
Yeah.
Freedom of
Thank you guys.
Self-Forgetfulness is a great book.
What?
Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness is a great book.
Yeah, that's true. Freedom of
That's all I
self-forgetting.
got.
It's a good book. I'll go ahead. Thank you guys for watching this. We really appreciate it. Sorry if there was any like weird technical difficulties because of things, but we are really excited for this week. And like Ray said, we really appreciate your prayers as we start this next journey. And we are also praying for you guys as a body of believers that we're all working together towards a greater purpose than this life. So I'll go ahead and pray, and then that'll be that. Dear Lord, thank you so much for this time, and thank you for your word that we can really dive into it and learn a lot from it that applies to a lot of different situations, and especially right now, Lord. I pray that you don't let us get consumed with ourselves and feel um, important and big and giant, but that you would um, allow us to have a spirit of humility, that we recognize your bigness and your greatness, and that we remember our place, that it is to push our brothers and sisters to look more like you and to love you more and to live their lives honoring you as we are given this gift of life here on earth. And um, I pray that we're all working towards a sanctified version of ourselves, and that we are looking forward to seeing you on the other side of this life. Bless our weeks as we go out from here, and in your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.